Hey guys, welcome to Requiem Comics. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Sean.
And today we are going to be talking about Scott Pilgrim, the entire series.
All 6 volumes of Scott Pilgrim.
Now, this is a book, or books, that you actually chose, Sean. So would you like to talk about why you chose these books?
Well, it's Pride Month,
right.
And I figured we would choose a book that does a fairly decent job of portraying the LGBTQ.
I guess they do dabble in it.
They do quite a bit, actually. Yeah. One of the things that I really enjoy about this book is that it does kind of break down stereotypes, particularly in regards to the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. And you see that through several of the characters in the books as you kind of grow with them. So one of the major things for me is that this being Pride Month, this being a month of acceptance and just loving who you love and being who you are and coming to terms with who you are, Scott Pilgrim kind of is the embodiment of that whole concept. Mm-hmm. This is a book about a guy who falls in love with a girl, head over heels crazy for her, and can't seem to really get his life together, mm-hmm. and has a lot of trouble accepting who he is and the things that he's done in the past, and a lot of the things that Ramona, the girl he falls for, has done in the past as well. So a lot of the themes in this book are, obviously love, but you also get jealousy. You get this notion of trust, these kind of things. So this kind of brings together what average everyday people go through, whether you're straight or gay or bisexual or transgender or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So that was the main reason we chose this, because Happy Pride. So. Mm-hmm. We'll start, I guess, just by kind of going through the characters, because there is a lot of characters in these books.
Yeah.
So just kind of an over-the-top view. You have, obviously, Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, the main character. Kind of an absent-minded idiot.
Yeah, a lovable idiot. I think Ramona says that several times about him, that he is a lovable idiot.
Yeah.
He's in a band, Sex Bomb.
Yeah, he plays the bass.
Yeah, he knows the Final Fantasy II bass line.
Yeah.
He lets us know that. So he's in a band with Kim Pine. She's known as the smart one. She has freckles, and she dated Scott Pilgrim in high school. And in the band, you also have Stephen Stills, also known as the talented one. He's kind of the main band guy. He's the one who does all the work in the band. He mm-hmm. writes the songs. He's the one who comes up with all the chords for them to play. He's the one who gets the shows, etc. Then, of course, you have Ramona Flowers, who is the girl that Scott falls head over heels for. Mm-hmm. She's just, for the most part, in this story, known as mysterious.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of mystery behind her.
Well, her age, her backstory, everything. And the whole concept of the book is basically Scott ends up falling for her, but in order for them to be together, he has to fight her 7 evil exes.
Yes. So that kind of comes into play with the jealousy theme.
Yeah, and basically every book is a different ex.
Absolutely, and it gets pretty intense. So you also have Wallace Wells, which is Scott's roommate, also known as the gay roommate.
Yeah.
The thing I love about Wallace is that he is arguably the most stable character in this whole book. He likes to have fun, but he's the one who owns everything in the apartment. Yeah. He's the one who pays all the bills. He's the one who, trains Scott, pumps Scott up, tells him to go for it, against all odds. Absolutely despises
He's the one that tells Scott what his mom says.
Exactly. Actually, he makes a reference and says, "No, Scott, I tell you what your mom says to you."
Exactly.
So there's that. There's also Knives Chow, which is who Scott actually starts off the book series dating.
Yeah, the 17-year-old high school girl.
Chinese schoolgirl.
Yeah. They like hold hands and stuff. It's nothing really too serious.
Not really. Then you move into young Neil, who is Stephen Stills' roommate. He's younger than the rest of them.
Well, it's his brother.
Is it?
Yeah. It's his younger brother.
Oh, because he's got a different last name over here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so now
I was always under the impression that it was his brother.
I think in the movie he's his brother.
Okay.
But I don't think in this he is. I think he's just his roommate.
Okay.
Then you also have Julie Powers, who dates Stephen Stills on and off.
Yeah.
She's known as the bitchy one. No one really likes her, but she throws all the parties. So
you kind of have to deal with her.
And then you get some other minor characters like Stacy Pilgrim, Holly and Joseph, who are actually Kim's roommates. Mm-hmm. There's Sandra, Monique,
Envy
Como,
Adams.
Envy Adams. So many characters.
Yeah.
And each one is pretty instrumental in the development of Scott Pilgrim.
And don't worry, because if you start forgetting who all these characters are, the books will constantly remind you.
It's true. So one of the things I really enjoy about this book is that from front to back, all 6 volumes, the continuity is solid.
Well, you really love this comic too.
This is my favorite comic book series.
Yeah.
So, hands down. But it's the dialogue really, really makes this book series.
It is fantastic.
And it does such a good job of bringing everything together. Even just the minor characters that you don't think much of actually do play pretty critical roles in the development of some of the more major characters. As we go through, we'll get more into that. But firstly, starting off, Scott Pilgrim dating Knives Chow, a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
She's in high school. Some people are cool with it. Others, mostly Kim.
Everyone's kind of making fun of him for it,
More or less. So the whole premise is him and Knives are, he just got out of this really big long-term relationship. He's a young 20-something. He's 23 at the beginning of the series. And Knives is kind of this, it's easy. It's just, she's there, it's fun, it's nice.
Yeah.
Nothing serious.
It's been a while since his last relationship where he had his heart broken. So he's kind of like, this is him sort of testing the waters a little bit. From there, he meets Ramona.
And once he meets Ramona, actually, it's funny how he meets Ramona. She actually is from the United States. She gets a job up here in Toronto, ironically where we live, which is another aspect to this book I absolutely love. Because
it's really cool reading this book with all the Toronto references, living in Toronto and being like,
absolutely,
yeah, Sneaky D's,
Honest Eds,
yeah.
The Chaos Theater is actually located the Queen of Bathurst, around the corner from where I live. Not an actual theater; it's actually a shelter. Which just kind of goes to further proof that the final ex-boyfriend is actually really evil and kind of a giant dick.
Because he knocks down a homeless shelter to build his giant theater.
Yeah, so he can fight Scott Pilgrim. So Ramona actually appears to Scott in a dream. Because, as we find out later, he actually has a subspace highway that runs through his head. It's really empty. Mostly because Scott is very aloof.
Do you want to explain a little bit what the subspace highway is?
So the subspace highway basically is this, it's 3.5 miles long stretch that kind of, you can walk in one door and then you can end up where you need to go in very little time. So Ramona, being a delivery girl, she gets this job working for Amazon, uses the subspace highway to make deliveries. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of this is that it runs directly through Scott Pilgrim's head. So if he's sleeping, which he spends most of his time sleeping, he ends up seeing Ramona running through his head. He ends up finding her at a library with Knives, and he kind of has this realization holy shit, she's actually a real person. Then he goes on this epic hunt to find her.
Yeah.
So they go to a party. Julie, at this point, is dating Stephen Stills. I guess they're kind of on and off again, so I'm pretty sure at this point they're dating.
Yeah.
But I think there's reference to the fact that they broke up. But so they go to a party, and Scott approaches Como, who is this knows everyone hipster, tries to figure out who she is, finds out who she is, has a really, really, really awkward first encounter with Ramona, and at that point basically thinks, I screwed this up. He ends up ordering some CDs off of Amazon. Ramona shows up. He begs and begs for her to just even hang out with him. They start hanging out. And then she says, if you're going to date me, Scott, you have to defeat my 7 evil exes.
But wait a minute, Sean. Weren't you saying that he was dating a 17-year-old Chinese schoolgirl?
He was. Which actually plays into a later part of the books, which has to deal with cheating.
Well, it pretty much takes till the second book till he breaks up with the 17-year-old.
Yeah.
And actually, and he's already pretty much dating Ramona at this time.
Yes, he flat out cheats on Knives with Ramona at this point. So now he's got to fight these evil exes. Your first evil ex, Matthew Patel. He has mystical powers. He can summon demon hipster chicks who shoot fireballs.
I have to say that honestly, I thought that was kind of the most boring of the X battles.
Completely agree.
It was kind of just an introduction to the idea of it.
Yeah, he's like the setup so that you know what to expect kind of going forward.
Yeah.
It's a pretty generic, straightforward fight. Mm-hmm. Scott beats him. Scott is known as the best fighter in the province of Ontario.
Very, very video game influenced.
Absolutely.
And anime influenced.
So yeah, Matthew Patel is more of a setup for the overall, fights to come, because each fight gets a little more complicated as you go. Mm-hmm. And this is where you get more into this discussion of like the themes. Lucas Lee being the second one, he's now this big movie star. In the movie, he's Chris Evans. When Scott shows up to fight him, it's over pretty fast as a fight. He punches him, knocks him down, grabs him, throws him into Casa Loma, which is a castle located in the city.
Yeah.
Throws him into the wall there.
All the locations in these books are like actually real places.
Yes, with the exception of
the Chaos Theater.
The Chaos Theater.
Yeah.
So yeah, he beats him there, and then what happens after that is not so much a fight, it's more of a...
He tricks him.
Conversation that leads into, yes, kind of this sneaky way of beating him. Yeah. He challenges him. Lucas Lee is a former skate star. Challenges him to do the, a quote-unquote grindy thingy on some railings. Lucas Lee goes down, explodes, he dies. Mm-hmm. Your third fight is when you really get into past relationships.
Yeah, this is where I think the series really started to pick up steam and become really interesting.
Absolutely. With Lucas Lee and Matthew Patel, when their fights are done, they're done.
It's very black and white, like, oh, I need to fight the evil X, let's do it, fight done.
Yes.
With the third book, you start getting into Scott's past relationship, because the third evil X is dating the girl that broke Scott's heart.
Yes. So Envy Adams, or Natalie, she's referred to by Scott, used to date. She went off, formed her own band after leaving, Stephen Stills and Scott Pilgrim. She went off to do her own thing. She was driven. She didn't see them being driven, so she dumped them, took off, moved to Montreal, where she starts dating Todd. Ironically, Todd, who, yes, is a vegan, also dated Ramona Flowers. Mm-hmm. So this is where you kind of get this first, crossover between the two. This is where you get, big X's kind of converging for the first time.
Well, this is where they really start driving home the themes of your past and how your past comes back to haunt you.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the big things I like about this is that the fight itself actually takes place in Honest Ed's, and it's basically a race to the end. You got to run through Honest Ed's, and you got to beat the other person, and then you got to leave the other side.
Yeah, they both end up kind of going crazy in there and blowing the place up.
Yeah, which means they have to postpone their fight.
Yeah.
So the next part of the fight, the next day, Envy and her band, The Clash of Demon Head, named after a video game, actually they're setting up to perform, and Envy finds out that Todd, who she's currently dating, is actually cheating on her with the drummer of the band. Basically, everyone gets really pissed off. Envy Adams beats the shit out of Todd. More madness ensues.
Todd beats the shit out of her.
Todd beats her up. Scott jumps in. It's another epically huge battle.
And then the vegan police show up.
And then the vegan police show up and de-veganize our friend Todd here.
Yeah, because he ate gelato. And
because he ate chicken parm.
Yeah.
Because chicken parm is not vegan.
It's not?
No, it's not. Huh. And, gelato's milk and eggs.
I learned a lot from this book.
There you go. So the whole point of this is that at the end, Envy is really, really bitter towards Scott. Mm-hmm. And she's having a hard time accepting the fact that he just beat her boyfriend and that her boyfriend was cheating on her this whole time.
Yeah.
Scott really wants closure. He wants to kind of move on from Envy. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't get that closure.
Not here.
Not here. So then you move on. You get to the fourth volume. And that's when you find out a little bit more about Ramona's past.
Yeah.
Ramona dated a girl named Roxy.
Her roommate in college.
Yes. Scott and Ramona at this point start having a lot of problems.
Scott's trying to figure out how to tell her that he loves her at this point.
Yes, and he doesn't quite know how to put it into words because he's never felt this way before.
Yeah.
This is causing a lot of tension between him and Ramona, and then Roxy actually ends up at one point moving in with Ramona. Not necessarily moving in, more like staying there.
Well, because Scott also is visited by an old high school friend, Lisa.
Lisa,
who moved away. And Ramona kind of thinks that there's something more going on between the two of them, and Lisa actually does like Scott, but
yeah. So what happens is Ramona is assuming that Scott is cheating, and Scott is having trouble accepting the fact that not trouble accepting the fact that he loves her. He's trying to come up with a way to say he loves her, but at all this time, it's creating this uncertainty because he hasn't really said it. He's becoming a little more distant. So there's a lot of tension between them.
They're also kind of playing around with the idea of them sort of possibly moving in together because Wallace and him are about to lose their place.
Yes. So that's another factor too, is Scott is about to have no place to live.
Yeah.
So he shows up to talk to Ramona about this, and he finds Roxy in the house.
Yeah, and he's like, what the fuck, man? She's trying to kill me.
When that fight starts, it's really funny because at the same time, Knives Chow's dad, who is also a ninja, is actually stalking Scott at the time. And he keeps jumping in and, cutting streetcars in half and trying to kill Scott.
Yeah.
Because he does not think he should be with Knives. He's a little behind on times, but...
Yeah, well, Knives is still obsessed with Scott.
So, 100% obsessed with him.
From his point of view, he's basically going by what he knows through Knives.
Yeah. So this fight breaks out. He's fighting Roxy. Scott's fighting Roxy. And then Knives' dad jumps down and starts fighting Scott. So now he's fighting two ninjas. And he ends up defeating Roxy and splits her in half. And it's a pretty epic fight scene.
Yeah.
And then moving on from there, you get... who comes next? The Katanagi twins?
Yeah. Book 5, which I think was actually my favorite book, rereading the whole thing. It's actually not very action heavy compared to the first couple books, which I feel deal with the more black and white, good versus evil. This is, I think, where you really start seeing the characters in terms of the way that they were set up originally, where it's like, okay, this is the band, this is Scott's living situation, this is what he does in his day-to-day life. This is, I think, or maybe it starts to happen in book 4, but between the two, you really start seeing all the characters start to evolve.
Yeah.
And move past their little cliques and where they currently are in their lives.
Yeah, Scott gets a job.
Yeah.
He struggles to hold the job because he's so preoccupied with his relationship with Ramona.
That was in book 4 because her and the ninja chick show up at his restaurant.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then he loses it. He gets fired, actually, at the restaurant.
Yeah.
He gets his job back in 5.
No, it's the same. It's in 4 as well because he's still wearing the same T-shirt.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, because he goes to show up and they're like, "Are you wearing the same shirt that you were wearing yesterday?" And he's like, "No."
So in book 5, this is where you start to see this element of cheating. Mm-hmm. Ramona has found out from Knives that Scott cheated on both of them.
Yeah.
Scott looks at it as, no, I cheated on Knives with you.
You weren't wronged.
But Ramona looks at it as, I didn't know you were with Knives when you started dating me.
And she's also like, I didn't know you were that type of person.
Yeah.
Period. Now I know that you're capable of that.
But the whole point of this is that the Katanagi twins, Ramona dated both of them.
At the same time. Cheating on them.
Which is why the twins have sworn to always stick together and be twins forever and defeat Scott Pilgrim.
And they have this really cool double dragon style, fighting style.
Oh, I love it. They link
do the
arms
kick.
And
they do the kick, man.
The hurricane kick.
Yeah.
It's a really good fight. But the other part to this too is that though the Katanagi twins are going after Scott because they're pissed off that Ramona cheated on both of them with each other, the Katanagi twins find a different way to get Scott. They lure him out. They lure him out of his comfort zone. And what they do is they kidnap Kim, who Scott used to date.
Yeah.
Who is also, as Scott puts it later on, the only constant person in his life.
Yeah.
The only person that no matter how shitty of a person he is, she stands by him regardless because, yes, they are friends. Mm-hmm. So Scott, feeling obligated to go save Kim from these crazy guys, runs over after a horrible night of drinking. He's hungover as hell. Kim is trapped in a cage, hungover as hell.
It actually says she's still a little drunk.
She's still a little drunk. Mm-hmm. So this fight breaks out, and then what you kind of get from this is that not only did Scott do something wrong, he cheated on Knives and he cheated on Ramona. Mm-hmm. But you also find out that Ramona also did this.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you find out that Scott's relationship with Kim was less carefree as Scott thought it was.
Yeah.
He realizes he really hurt Kim.
Yeah.
And even though Kim was really hurt by him, she still stuck by him. Mm-hmm. Kind of playing back into this theme of, growing up, kind of coming to terms with, the person you are and how you're going to handle situations as a mature adult. So him and Kim, they kind of come out of this battle a little bit more, friendly towards each other. Kim is less, sarcastic and rude. Kim leaves. Mm-hmm. She then decides she's going to move back home, back to Northern Ontario, and that's that. So then finally, you get to the last book. Mr. G-Man Graves, Gideon Graves, shows up. He is the crazy, obsessed Great White Buffalo of Ramona's past.
Yeah, he organized this whole Evil X thing.
He got drunk
and posting on Craigslist.
Exactly. He was in a really bad place. He got drunk. He posted an ad on Craigslist. Turns out Ramona had a lot of Evil X-boyfriends, and he was pretty floored by that. So he organizes this whole thing.
Imagine the ones who didn't see the ad.
There you go. I mean, come on, who checks Craigslist?
Yeah.
Is that still a thing?
It's all about Kijiji.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially in Toronto. Okay. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah.
So the whole thing with this is it's not just about Scott, coming out to terms with who he is and how he's growing and the person he wants to be. This also has a lot to do with how Ramona is going to evolve as a character. Ramona traditionally runs away. That's what she's always done.
That's what she does at the end of book 5. She runs away, and Scott's kind of on his own to pick up the pieces in book 6. And through this, you get a lot of self-reflection about his past. I kind of want to get into that more once we're done recapping.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting how the focus of the story shifts.
Yeah, absolutely.
From being a story of good versus evil to being more about immaturity and the way you view the world.
Yeah.
But let's get back to the recap.
So he shows up to the Chaos Theater to fight Gideon because he thinks at this point Ramona, who has run away, as Jesse pointed out in the previous book, he thinks Gideon is with Ramona. Gideon's actually dating Envy at this point. Envy's now become a solo artist. He's with her. He treats her like crap. Ramona's nowhere to be found. So he challenges him. He gets his ass kicked. He actually dies. Mm-hmm. Ironically, he did pick up an extra life in, I think it was volume 3.
Yep.
He picks up an extra life, but while he's dead, he has this almost dreamlike revelation. Ramona comes to him and basically says, look, I've spent my entire life running from my past. You can't do the same thing. We need to move forward and accept who we are if we want to, be together and build a relationship.
Yeah.
Scott grabs his extra life, comes back to life. Epic battle. This time Ramona comes out. Ramona's there fighting alongside Scott. They beat up Gideon. And then right at the end, you find out the whole time Stephen Stills was actually gay.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how it ends.
Him and Ramona kind of end up together. Scott's a little bit more of an adult than he was in Volume 1. And
he gets promoted at work.
Yeah.
He has an apartment. He can support himself. He's able to balance both home and work.
And yeah, so let's get into some of the deeper themes. One of the things that really impressed me rereading this, that I haven't read this book for years and years and years. Last time I read it, I think I was like 18, so I was still practically a teen myself. It really impressed me how much this book wasn't even really just about relationships as I remembered it. Mm-hmm. It's more about growing up and immaturity. And like I was saying earlier, the first few volumes, it's very cut and dry, black and white. This character is good, this character is evil, beat the evil character, go to the next level kind of thing.
Exactly.
It's set up like a video game.
Yeah.
But in the last volume, you really get this sort of self-reflection where Scott's like, okay, maybe my relationships and where they went wrong, maybe it wasn't also one-sided.
Yeah.
Maybe there are two sides to the story. He wasn't just a paragon of virtue, as Envy puts it at one point. And that was really interesting to me. And that really took the series to a next level because that's life.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own side of the story. Sometimes, everyone does bad things sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you're young especially, but people also mature.
Well, that's the thing, the Scott Pilgrim series is not, it's as much as it is a love story, It's actually more of a coming-of-age story.
Absolutely.
This is about 20-somethings trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah.
You know, love, work, friends, trying to balance everything, figure out what they're going to do with their lives.
Getting drunk, going to pizza at 3 a.m.
As a 20-something, I can relate to a lot of this. A lot of people had, big relationships when they were in their, late teens, early 20s. Scott Pilgrim's was Envy Adams. Mm-hmm. I had a relationship like that. Didn't end very well. Didn't get the closure that I would have wanted.
Yeah.
Not until later in life. And that's kind of the point, right? Is that this story it's the typical coming of age story for a 20-something. Mm-hmm. Figuring out who you are. Is that Scott, as much as he, has the power of love on his side, he's able to pull a sword out of his chest at one point, it's about self-actualization.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, comparing it to the movie, and the movie's great. It was exactly what it needed to be for a 2-hour version of this story. But you really, the movie pretty much ends with, he gets the fucking sword of self-respect.
Yeah.
And that just kind of happens in terms of, he comes to terms with how he feels about Romana and stuff, and it's more through that. I really liked how, in the books, it has less to do with his relationship, and it has more to do with the fact where it's okay, now he's gotten to a point where he has a job, he's becoming more self-sufficient, he's looking at his life in a less black and white way, which actually allows him to get that closure.
Yeah.
And that's where his self-respect comes from at the end of the series.
Yeah. And that's the overall theme is, accepting yourself, learning from your past mistakes.
Well, it's that whole kind of notion of you can't really truly be happy with someone else until you kind of come to terms with yourself.
Well, and that's the other thing, too. It's not even just with yourself.
And then they kind of band together to kind of make themselves stronger to help work on those things. But they're aware of them by the end of the book.
And that's kind of the key. And it's not just that they're aware of themselves.
Yeah.
They're aware of the other partner.
Yeah, they're no longer hiding those parts of each other from each other.
The jealousy, the past relationships. I know a lot of people who have had relationships that they've struggled with because someone in the relationship has a hard time with how many people their partner has dated in the past.
Right.
Maybe it was more than them and they feel like, well, I don't like that. I think that's really weird that you were with that many people. Mm-hmm. So you get these kind of tensions that form in these relationships. Yeah. And the idea with this is that you're coming to terms and accepting the fact that Scott loves Ramona for who she is, regardless of her past. Mm-hmm. But in order to do that, he has to learn to love himself and what he has done in the past.
Well, that's the thing. All his insecurities with her past are really just kind of insecurities with himself.
And it's the same with Ramona and Scott, vice versa.
Yeah.
With the cheating, for example, she assumes he's cheating with Lisa. Ironically, the evil exes in this case happen to be the twins, which she cheated on. Mm-hmm. She has this concern because she's done it in the past, so she needs to accept the fact that Scott's telling the truth because he doesn't do that. He turns her down. He turns Lisa down because he loves Ramona. But Ramona has a hard time comprehending that because of her past.
Because Ramona's, that's in book 4 when she has Roxy stay over. Yeah. And in fact, Ramona actually kind of does more because she's like, oh, we just made out a little bit and then passed out. I assume you did the same.
Yeah.
It's really cool how they take all these realistic and very, very relatable themes. It's one of the most, I think, relatable books in terms of being a 20-something in the 2000s. Especially kind of a nerdy 20-something.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it kind of goes with all those fantastical elements. You have pretty much anime fights throughout the whole thing. You have all these video game sensibilities thrown in with him having an extra life. When enemies die, they turn into change. Stuff like that. When he tells Romana he loves her, he gets the power of love sword. Yeah. All those things, but it's still, throughout it all, feels very grounded and very relatable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that largely plays to the strength of the dialogue and the characters.
And again, the dialogue for this is so amazingly well done. It's so crucial to the story. We've discussed in previous episodes before where I've had some issues with some of the comics that we've read. Mm-hmm. Mostly because I found that the dialogue was not concise enough for the little amount that they're putting in. Mm-hmm. With this, you're not getting an overwhelmingly large amount of dialogue, but you're getting enough to get a complete story.
And it all counts.
Yes. Every single piece of dialogue in this is pretty crucial. Even some of like the really lame jokes that get made.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Wallace constantly makes jokes about having sex with Scott because he knows they're friends. It's not serious, but he likes to poke fun at that. He knows that, Scott has slept in his bed for the last year in a non-sexual manner because Scott didn't have a bed.
Yeah.
But they're still friends. And they poke fun at things like that. Even that stuff, though, goes towards building these characters. Wallace Wells is... And I actually read an article on Bookish. It was the top 10 comic book LGBTQ, history-changing kind of reads. Mm-hmm. Scott Pilgrim ranked number 5 on that list. And the main reason is because it kind of breaks the mold of some of these stereotypes. Wallace Wells, being the gay roommate, typically in a stereotypical fashion, is usually the one who just wants to party. He's never in a stable relationship. Mm-hmm. Usually, the gay roommate is stereotyped as, yes, this kind of almost like a flake person that you have around almost as an accessory. Mm-hmm. Where in this case, this series completely turns that upside down. Wallace Wells is not only Scott's trainer and champion, he's at pretty much every single battle that happens, and he pre-trains Scott on how to fight these battles, which is essentially just giving him advice. Mm-hmm. He's the one who is in a stable relationship. He's the one that, at the beginning, he has fun, he goes out, he drinks, but he's the only one who has a consistently stable relationship outside of their group of friends.
That's true.
He dates a guy named Mobile, who is a psychic. He dates him for, I think half the series.
Yeah, that starts in what, volume 3?
I think it's volume 3.
Yeah.
You don't meet him until, volume 5 or something. When Wallace moves
you meet
in
him
with
right
him.
At the end.
Yeah.
I think volume 6 even.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because Scott sees him and he's like, it's Gideon! Because he just starts thinking that everyone with glasses is Gideon, including his own brother.
Yeah, he kicks his own brother Lawrence in the head, assuming he is Gideon.
Yeah.
But my point
This is what we meant by Scott's a little slow.
Yes. My point is with Wallace is that Wallace is the most stable character. Mm-hmm. He's the one with the job. He's the one who feeds Scott Pilgrim. He's the one who houses Scott Pilgrim. He's the one who has a bed for Scott Pilgrim.
He's kind of the dad of the series.
More or less. Which is very contrary to the way you see gay roommates specifically portrayed in a lot of other medium forms.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I like about this. The other thing, too, you have Ramona Flowers, bisexual. Mm-hmm. You have Kim and Knives Chow. They get drunk and they experiment with each other.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I know plenty of girls that have done that.
There you go.
Yeah.
The other thing I really like about that, too, Scott doesn't tell anyone for quite a while.
Yeah.
And he only tells Ramona, who at that point they're having a little, more of a stable patch. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't go blabbing that around. He respects that. He respects the fact that Kim is actually happy at this point.
Well, I think that's kind of the nicest thing about the way that it treats the LGTB kind of factor of this book is that it's such a normal part of this book and these characters' lives that it's not necessarily it's a big part of the book, but it's not necessarily thrown in the characters' faces nonstop. It's just we're friends with people of all variety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically. And I thought it was really cool how almost nonchalant it's treated.
Yeah, it normalizes it, which unfortunately in some parts of the world it's not viewed that way, which is very unfortunate. But this story does a really good job of it's just everyday life. So there's definitely that element to it, which I really enjoyed as well. And that just adds to the character development of all these characters. Because these characters, again, the premise of this series is coming of age, figuring out who you are. They're just done university. They're trying to sort out their lives. And yes, you have, Kim, Stephen Stills, who ends up dating Kim's old roommate, Joseph.
Well, I mean, Stephen Stills is definitely not a stereotypical gay dude.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
It kind of comes out of left field, to be honest with you.
I don't...
Not complete.
Agree.
When you reread it, doesn't, but it's not something that you really
it's
assume
kind of
going in.
It's it's put in your face right at the end.
Yeah.
But there were clues throughout the last 3 volumes of this that kind of hinted towards that.
Yeah. But I mean, on my first reading, I totally was one of those people where at the end I was like, oh, really? That was the thing? But then you go back and read and you're like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. And that's, part of the thing is he's constantly in and out of relationship with Julie. He has a lot of problems with Julie. Mm-hmm. They don't get along. They obviously should not be dating.
Yeah, and through most of the book, you kind of just chalk that up to, oh, well, it's Julie.
Julie's an asshole.
She's just bitter as fuck.
Yeah, she's actually, at the beginning of the book, she is known as the bitchy one.
Yeah.
And at the end of the book, when Scott kind of has this, clear mind now, he's kind of looking at things more objectively, he doesn't view her as bitchy. He views her as she's just Julie.
Yeah.
And you kind of get this understanding of where a lot of Julie's bitterness comes from. And it's actually even hinted at again later on when she thinks that maybe Stephen Stills has a thing for knives. Mm-hmm. And they're at a dinner with their group of friends. And she tells them, oh, I'm not worried about you and knives. I think that's one of those other hints that kind of gets dropped.
Yeah.
Where Julie now knows. And Julie's attitude completely changes. In fact, it changes so much that she actually leaves the city and moves to Montreal. Mm-hmm. She wants to start, anew, afresh in Montreal, doing something else. She wants to kind of get away from it all. So she comes to terms with this. You have young Neil in here who gets completely abandoned. And at one point, they find him in his bedroom, huddled in a corner.
He's going through that first kind of high school relationship kind of phase.
Yeah, he started dating Knives. Knives didn't really want to date him. She only dated him to get to Scott.
Yeah.
Stephen Stills is now so preoccupied with recording the Sex Bomb album with Joseph, who he ends up, dating. Young Neil, who later becomes Neil. Mm-hmm. He feels very abandoned, and at the end you kind of see him develop as his own character where he's now just Neil.
Well, you kind of see him kind of entering that sort of like asshole-ish, like
I've had
my heart broken, like he's kind of starting that stage now that all the other characters are kind of coming out of.
Yeah.
And there was even a line which I think sums up the entire series perfectly, where Romana kind of bumps into him at the end. And she's like, you know what, you're kind of an asshole. And he's like, whatever, I'll grow out of it.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, yeah.
And it is. It proves that, as a 20-something, this is kind of a cycle that 20-somethings will go through.
Yeah, you kind of are at that age where you're figuring out, not only so much to do with yourself, but with the way the world works. And you kind of become less self-centered about the way you view the world. And that's a big part of Scott's journey in this. Like, he starts seeing things less as I'm the good guy and everyone else is the bad guy. And he views things more in gray areas.
Well, and that's kind of what the whole Gideon fight's about. Gideon, throughout the book, Ramona's head will glow occasionally.
Yeah.
It's Gideon using, this form of technology he invented to manipulate emotions. Mm-hmm. Ramona learns to control it a little bit, which is how she's able to escape into subspace and stuff like that. Scott's head starts to glow, and it turns out that Gideon had actually been manipulating his memories.
I didn't like that.
I know, and we'll get into that in 1 second.
Okay.
He's manipulating his memories. So Scott has this belief that everything he's ever done has been, good. Mm-hmm. Once he realizes that Gideon had been doing this, his memories start to come back, and he realizes that no, in fact, he was not always good. He hurt Kim. He hurt Knives.
Well, that kind of happens before this revelation.
This is when
this happens earlier on.
Yeah, but this is when his memories are finally complete, and he has this like. It even shows a couple panels where he has this vision like him and Ramona. It's like, oh, I love you, Ramona. And Ramona's like, oh my God, you're the best.
Yeah.
He realizes that's not true. Mm-hmm. He realizes at this point, because of Gideon's control, that he actually, in a lot of cases, was the asshole.
That was actually an element of this book that I didn't like. I think that it really could have done without that explanation. Considering the whole theme of the last book, I think it actually would have been a little bit better if that's just kind of how Scott saw his past. Because, when you're young, you view things through a filtered lens. I think it would have just worked well as a metaphor on its own. Without needing that extra little bit of the bad guy was manipulating his memories the whole time. I think it should have just been a stage of him growing up. And to me, that kind of ruined that a little bit.
That's fair.
It's one of my very few minor complaints about this series. The other one would maybe be the Matthew Patel fight. I think that could have used a little bit more, but even then, like the one big thing was that Gideon revelation at the end.
I actually don't have that much of an issue with it. I like it as the use of a metaphor for this notion of people view themselves as holier than thou in most cases.
Mm-hmm. Well,
he's the reality check. Gideon is very, very bitter. He didn't give two fucks about Ramona when they were dating. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until after Ramona left that he gave a shit.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is that if Scott doesn't change and realize and accept his past,
he's going to become Gideon.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I liked that metaphor.
I liked it, but I think that they could have used that metaphor would have been perfectly intact without that one little aspect of it.
That's fair, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I don't think, to me, it
doesn't bug you as much as it bugs me.
And well, we've had this discussion before and things.
We've had it in the reverse many, many times.
Yeah.
Where you're like, this one thing, and I'm like, just chill on that one thing.
Comic book, right? You always excuse it as it's just a comic book.
So, I mean, that's fair.
But that, to me, it wasn't make or break. I really did like the use of the metaphor.
It's not make or break at all for me, but it's losing a point for that one for sure.
Not for me, but fair enough. I guess the only thing we really have left to talk about, I mean, we took a 22-some minutes just talking about the summary of this book.
Yeah. Whose fault is that?
That's mine. I tripped over my words several times because it's a massive set of books.
Well, you just love this book, so I mean, you just loved geeking out about the story.
I did, and that's
I get
as
it.
a result, I ended up missing things. So I highly recommend this read. But let's talk about the art real fast.
Mm-hmm.
I love the artwork in this.
Well, Brian Lee O'Malley did the art as well, didn't he?
Yes, he did everything. Mm-hmm. He actually, in back of one of these books, discusses his process. He actually writes out the stories first as almost like a movie script, and then he goes back and then he does all the panels and stuff like that.
I think that's how it mostly.
Well,
a lot of writers.
That's fine, but in a lot of bigger comic companies,
it's cool to see, anyways. Yeah.
Well, and then a lot of bigger comic companies too, right? When you have a story, you're not talking to the writer necessarily unless you need clarification on something. There's a little more of a separation between the two because you can work.
I guess so.
You can work remotely when you're working with yourself. This is a process. This is your art.
Mm-hmm. So
you do things a little weird or different, whatever the case.
Well, you have that room to kind of do that.
But the art overall, I love it. It's very, I guess I would say anime-ish.
It's very anime. It gets, especially in the later volumes, it gets more of a chibi kind of feel.
Yeah, that would be what I'd go with.
Super deformed kind of. I liked it actually better in the later volumes. I find that the art becomes a lot cleaner. The lines become a lot more defined.
I don't disagree with that.
I think that the art in the later volumes does, because it kind of gets more of that anime feel. I feel like it does fit that sort of video game-ish sort of anime feel a little bit more.
It is in black and white,
mm-hmm.
with the exception of Volume 4, which has like this Sonic the Hedgehog-like color.
Yeah, the first few pages when they're all at the beach.
Which is pretty cool.
And they get Licks Burgers, which I used to work at Licks right around this time. So in story, I probably made them those burgers.
There you go. See? Another reason I love this is because it takes place in the city I live.
Yeah, you do kind of get pulled into it living in Toronto, and you do somewhat feel involved because Toronto is a character in this story.
Absolutely. The locations are so key to everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And as someone who hangs out at a lot of the places they go, Lee's Palace, Sneaky D's, it's really cool to have a comic that I can be like, yeah, I've totally been there.
Mm-hmm.
Like things like the Avengers and stuff are great because they take place in New York City.
But I actually like the fictional cities better when it comes to superhero comics.
Which is fair, and I don't think I would disagree with that because New York's real, but I don't live there. Yeah. I can't really relate to New York.
But Central City can be anywhere.
Yeah. Metropolis is actually based off of the city of Toronto.
Yeah. Was it?
Yes.
I always thought it was New York.
Nope. Toronto Star is supposed to be the Daily Star. When they originally created it, it was actually based off of the city of Toronto.
It's interesting.
There you go. I think I mentioned that in episode 1 when we did Action Comics New 52.
Oh, maybe. You act like I listen to you.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
But you're right. The city itself is a character in this. And it just, to me, as someone who lives here, it really brings it all together. It brings in the diversity that Toronto has. It brings in this, clash of different cultures and stuff that you see. It brings in just, to me, it sums up my life as a 20-something. And that's what I really like about this series.
It does do a great job at that. If nothing else, it does a great job of capturing that moment in time of being in the 2000s and being this age.
Absolutely. So, Jesse, at the end of the day, what would you give this rating and why?
What would I give it? I would give it a 9. It's pretty damn good. Like I said, I have a couple little nitpicks. I think that the art's a little messy in the first couple volumes, but I mean Brian O'Malley was doing it all himself, so I mean you got to give him credit. So I mean I don't want to be too hard on him for that. But yeah, I'd give it a 9. I don't think that it's perfect, but it's pretty damn good. What about yourself?
I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10.
Oh, wow, man.
This is my first 10 out of 10. Your first was obviously the Rebirth special that we did.
I might be giving another one next week.
There you go.
Yeah, spoilers.
I'd give this a 10 out of 10. Everything about this. Being a 20-something, love, jealousy, learning to accept yourself, overcoming your past mistakes, the diversity, the city. Everything about this is super relatable for me.
For sure.
And I think that a lot of people in their 20s can relate to this book series in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's specifically with, a character like Scott Pilgrim, or it's more so, a character like Wallace Wells, or even just, living in the city and experiencing the same kind of stuff that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
So, 10 out of 10 for me. I absolutely love this book. And
wow.
Even Joss Whedon loved this book.
Yeah, he's got a little quote there.
It says, Scott Pilgrim is the best book ever, is the chronicle of our time with Kung Fu, so perfect. Perfectly summed up by Joss Whedon.
That's pretty accurate.
You can't argue with Joss Whedon, let's be serious.
Well, I mean,
Don't argue with Joss Whedon. I tell you what Joss Whedon says, and you listen. So, that's our episode on for Requiem Comics this week.
Yeah.
Scott Pilgrim. Check it out. I highly recommend
You should definitely read this book. Everyone should read this book. I will totally agree with. I'm not quite giving it a 10, but I absolutely recommend it.
At the very least, watch the movie.
The movie is really good, but the book is definitely more in depth, as it always is.
And you just it's such a rich story. I can't explain it. But next week, Jesse...
next week...
Or, I guess 2 weeks, actually.
Okay, next time we are doing The Flash, the Terminal Velocity storyline. Actually, we're going to be doing the Reckless Youth storyline and the Terminal Velocity storyline. We're actually going to be reading single issues, so we're going to be doing Flash, the Wally West series, from 92 to 100.
Holy crap.
Those issues. There is a Terminal Velocity paperback that also has issue 0, but I don't have that, so we're going to be going through the single issues.
Sounds good to me. You can check us out at requiemcomics.blogspot.ca.
That's the one.
You can search us on iTunes, Requiem Comics, and you can find us on SoundCloud if you search Requiem Comics.
And you can comment to let us know what you think about Scott Pilgrim.
And if you didn't like it, well, I guess you can comment that, but I will argue with you.
Yeah.
Relentlessly.
He will.
So that's
he loves
this
to
episode.
argue.
I do.
Yeah.
It's kind of my thing.
That's cool.
Cool. So thanks again, guys.
See you later.